Okay. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. This is the 5th episode of the Shon Osimbo Sports Show. I'm so humbled to have everyone here just watching us, and today we have a very special guest that all of you have been wanting to talk to and listen to and interact with. And this is definitely the football commentator, Jim Beglin, joining us all the way from the UK. Welcome to the show, Jim. How have you been?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shon. I've been good, thankfully. All is well. I think Peter and I regard ourselves as very fortunate at the moment because even though we're not essential workers, we're deemed necessary enough to maintain what we do. So we're very fortunate to be out and about and to be able to attend the stadiums in the circumstances, because there's a lot of people who've been furloughed and are not working anymore. So I like staying busy, as does Peter. So we're very fortunate to be in the position we are.
Amazing. The last time we talked, I remember football had been suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but then again we had Project Restart, and we saw now Liverpool winning that title after 30 years. We saw Bayern Munich lifting the UEFA Champions League, and of course, as you're saying, you and Peter also got the chance, at least to be at the stadium. I know so many people are craving for that, but we understand due to the circumstances people can't be in the stadium. But how was it for you when these conditions and everything was put in place? And can you name some of the major changes you had to go through as commentators when Project Restart happened?
Yeah, well, the obvious change was the distance between us. And if I remember correctly, on Project Restart, we did the second game. There were two games played, I think, before everything was balanced out in terms of the number of fixtures everybody had played. So I think Sheffield United played at Aston Villa, and then we followed it, and we were at Manchester City Arsenal. And when I entered the stadium, when I realised all the protocols that we were told about had been put in place, it was a bit weird in terms of Peter was quite a way away from me. I mean, normally we're side by side and we can just turn to one another, and I can tell if Peter's going to take the microphone away from his mouth or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, it was a little different to that. And I'm thinking, is he going to say another word, or is he? So, and probably at the Etihad, it's the greatest distance that we have between us. I think everywhere else, it's quite smaller. But we've also worked some games off tube, it's called, and we've done some work for CBS in America on the Champions League, and we're actually in a booth in London, but we're separated by a glass screen or a plastic screen, so that keeps us apart. But yeah, it's very different. Even the lack of atmosphere, the fact that we have a crowd noise kind of fed in through our box into our earphones, into our cans. And all that took an awful lot of getting used to. But initially, right at the very start, it was very strange, and I didn't like it. I didn't feel it was normal.
And I remember also Peter saying there was a time he was commentating, and because of there are no fans in the stadium, the players could actually hear some of the things he was saying in the commentary box. So how is this, like, that atmosphere? Especially during commentating, how different is it? Because there are no fans at all, and you can imagine, especially in stadiums like Anfield, especially when the home team scores, that is Liverpool, how the crowd goes wild, and also this even helps during commentating. How is this different, and how does it make you feel?
Yeah, well, obviously we knew it was coming, so we were ready for it, but it was still very strange when we began to experience it. We had to adapt. We had to accept the fact, and then try and just allow it to sink in, and the fact that this is the way it's going to be. We can hear the players, shouting loudly from the pitch. As to say, maybe they were hearing Peter commentate. So it was, it was weird in that regard. And I didn't like it initially. I think I've already said that. And we had initially as well Shon, which didn't help. We had problems with, we have like technical boxes, which basically help us commentate from, and we have one each. But the feed, when they organized an atmospheric feed through FIFA, and when that was being played through initially, it was coming through on the wrong button, if you like, at the wrong source. So it was even stranger because of that, you know, and I didn't feel comfortable with it, because ordinarily I love to get in my position and I love to get my comms, both Peter and I, to a certain level. And then I like to get, we have a host broadcaster director always in our ear, and we have our own director in London in our ear. So I like to get all those at a certain level so I know I can hear what I want to hear. And then I put my cans on and I'm in my own little world. I'm cocooned and I love all that. But when the effects were being played in, it was terrible initially. And we were being told, I mean, there were people telling me on Twitter, we can't hear you, because we were being drowned out by the effects. So I said, I rang one of our producers, one of our senior producers, and I told him about the problem. And the next time we turned up, I think it was for our third game, it was all fixed and it was coming through the right source. And then I was able to just, you know, put that on a kind of a low feed. So it was there in the background and I had a little bit of atmosphere, but not too much. So eventually we figured it out.
Amazing. And I think it's called adjusting to the new normal. Now, when it comes to you and Peter, I can't even talk about this partnership. This is one of the best partnerships when it comes to football commentary, and everyone loves it. So let's head to our producer, Ed, who just put a picture of you and Peter. And this was sent to me before I had the interview with Peter. And now you're here, so I have to show you this picture. Let's see that coming up in a few. Yes. These are two goats, and I was told, and this is what I've been receiving every day, Jim. You and Peter are the two goats of football commentary. Just look at that picture, internalize it, and tell me, like when people talk about football commentary and you say Peter Drury and Jim Beglin, this is what they see, goats of football commentary. Talk to us about that.
Well, I don't see it that way, and I know Peter feels likewise. I learned very early on in my football career about the need to stay grounded, the need to remain humble, and that has never changed. And it's lovely to receive compliments, and we all like that, because it helps us inside mentally. It feeds our egos or whatever. But I have a feeling now whereby anytime I'm praised, I'm going to go soft. I'm going to get complacent, and I'm not going to do my job as sharply as I should be doing it. So, and I think Peter feels a little uncomfortable when he has that heaped on him too. Yes, it's nice to experience a little bit of that, but you can't let it enter your head. Because if you start buying into it and believing in it, then you get sloppy. That's the way I see it. But look, I appreciate that there seems to be a lot of love out there from a certain amount of people anyway for what we do, and I'm grateful for that. It's good to know that there are more people that seem to like the combination we have and the chemistry we have between us than dislike it. So that's always a plus.
Yes. And what makes your partnership so unique with Peter Drury?
Well, I guess I think we're similar in many respects in how we approach things. As I say, and I've always said this, that even though my job is very different to Peter's, mine is analytical. Peter's the good cop. I'm the bad cop, because it's my job at times, of course, to praise, but also to critique. And in doing that, I can be seen as the ugly version of the pairing, because Peter comes across as, ultra positive. But like I'm quite a glass half full person as well. I'm quite a positive person, and I think we just seem to hit it off. I remember working with him way back in the 90s for BBC 5 Live for BBC Radio, and we were at Stoke, and I can remember somebody tried something that Pele had once done in a World Cup with a dummy, which is very famous if you watch the clips from Pele. And he tried to do likewise, and it didn't come off. And I remember we just instantly had a laugh over that, and it just seemed to click. And And then I can remember we were working at ITV, the biggest commercial station in the UK. We were working together for that channel, and we were across at Euro 2008. And I can remember the bosses then saying, "Oh, you two have got something going." It seemed to kind of click with them. That, and you know, I followed him everywhere he's gone. I seem to have popped up behind Peter wherever he's gone, you know, and BBC, ITV, and now Premier League Productions. So we just get along. I don't know how it happens, but it just does sometimes, and we've never really questioned it. We've just surfed the wave.
Amazing. And also another partnership I know Paul talked about and have talked about in the past is yours and John Champions. Where is he nowadays?
I actually was in touch with Champers yesterday. He is now lead commentator for ESPN in America for the MLS, for Major League Soccer. And he signed, I think, a 5-year contract to do that. So he's based in Boston, in Massachusetts. And he's having a difficult time of it, I think, at the moment as well, because of the lockdown that they're experiencing, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be great guidance, because America at the moment seems to be between presidents, and nobody seems to be kind of making a stance on what should be done, etc. So, but the good news for Champs is he will finish with the playoffs shortly in AMLS. I think they begin next week. He'll be very busy for a while. And then on the 8th of December, he comes back to the UK. And last December, Amazon began covering the Premier League. And I actually worked one of the games, Wolverhampton Wanderers against Manchester City, with John Champion. So I'm hoping to do likewise again, because he's going to be working for Amazon, and so am I. But we just don't know which games and what pairings will be at the moment.
Yes, let's pray the organizers can get the hint and
hope so.
Pair you. Yes. Amazing. So before we go back to commentary, let's also talk about what's happening definitely in the Premier League. Liverpool won the league, and this means so much to you, Jim, because I know you played for the Reds before. You even penned down a poem for the wonderful Reds. Tell us how that made you feel, Jim.
Oh no, I was just really pleased for this current crop, because I was fortunate, Sean, in that I was actually asked to go with Kevin Ratcliffe, who's the former Everton captain. When I certainly played against Everton, he was one of the main players in that team, and a journalist called James Pearce from the Liverpool Echo at the time, and we were asked to go to Melwood and sit down with Jurgen Klopp and talk him through what derby days were like. This was before his first derby against Everton. And I realized then pretty quickly that this guy is something special. You know, I mean, he made me feel like I wanted to jump out of my chair and play for him. You know, he's that passionate about the game. So I think Liverpool were onto something really good at the time. But I didn't necessarily see it ending up like this. I mean, what he's managed to build is quite phenomenal. And it takes me back to my time as well, because I think an awful lot of the values that have been put in place, I think, existed, you know, back when I was playing. I'm sure, listen, for every team that wins, you know, there has to be something very good in place, both, you know, on the playing side and the managerial side. And I think certainly was the case with Liverpool. And I was fortunate to lift a couple of trophies back in the day. And I'm delighted this Liverpool team has finally gotten around to it. I think they were all devastated after Kiev and that Champions League defeat to Real Madrid. But they've bounced back superbly well to obviously beat Tottenham a year later and win the Champions League. And then to follow it up with Premier League is huge. And of course, the World Club Cup and the Super Cup. So, yeah, great things have been achieved by a seriously good manager and a really humble, driven playing staff.
Yes, but you have to be a bit sad for the fans. I know most of them are expressing what they're feeling right now because of the injuries that have happened, especially on the back line, and that is very scary for most fans. But are they likely, from how you've just seen so far in the season, are they likely to retain this Premier League title, or is it too tight already, having started the season on a high?
Well, I always like to, and I've said this in commentary, I always like to wait 8 to 10 games before you can give a proper assessment of each team. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that this time around, because some of the results have been absolutely bonkers. They've been crazy. And I think that the lack of a pre-season and the fact that the schedule for the teams in Europe is much, much tougher now. So there are big ups and downs happening. And I think it's very hard to call. Listen, I think as pleased as Liverpool fans were last season to more or less run away with it and to get it completed, I like it when it remains close, when it's very hard to call. And I honestly hope it can be like that for most of this season, certainly right up until the end. But at the moment, I think it's very difficult, because I think Leicester have a genuine chance. And I've been impressed with Tottenham so far as well. You know, this is besides Liverpool and Manchester City. And maybe had Manchester United got off to a better start, as we thought they would based on the second half of last season, you know, they might have had a chance too. But obviously things haven't really taken the route that they would have liked. So at the moment, it's anybody's guess.
Yes, and you're very vocal when we saw what happened during the Liverpool-Everton match. I know it's a very, very heated match. You know, it's a big rival, the Merseyside derby, and we saw what Jordan Pickford did to Virgil van Dijk, and you're not the only one. So many people made calls for Pickford to be penalised. Tell us why you are vocal about that.
Well, I can remember on the day. Working for Premier League Productions, sometimes I have to bite my lip and I can't say what I'd like to say, maybe, or be as strong in terms of, you know, what I use verbally. And when Michael Oliver didn't see it as the referee, I thought David Coote in the VAR hub would certainly draw attention to it and maybe would sort it out. And then we heard something in our ear from our director saying it's a subjective issue. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, anything can be subjective, but this is quite serious. At that stage, I didn't know Virgil van Dijk had damaged his ACL to the extent he did. But I just thought it was a reckless challenge, and offside was given. And I remember asking the question in commentary, does that mean that everything that occurs after the offside flag goes up is forgotten about? I said, because surely that has to be looked at and it has to be assessed. And it wasn't. And then I think I put something out on Twitter as to whether he should receive Jordan Pickford retrospective punishment, which upset all the Evertonians. And they all came after me on Twitter. But I think the FA have a rule in place, or a law in place, whereby if a referee is deemed to have witnessed the incident, then they cannot punish the player retrospectively. And I think that's absolute nonsense. And I think it should be thrown out. And I'm not saying that Jordan Pickford meant to hurt Virgil van Dijk, far from it, but he went in reckless fashion, and that should have been called to order, and it wasn't.
Amazing. I can totally feel that, because you're also a former player, so you understand also whatever goes on goes on the field.
I think that if I go back to my own career, more or less ended at Goodison as well, because I ended up breaking my leg in a Merseyside derby, and that obviously kicked in a little bit as well as part of my feeling towards the whole Pickford and Van Dijk incident.
Wow. Makes sense. Makes total sense. Now, let's quickly go through the comments before we continue with the interview. You have Ochiweda saying locked. You have Kwanya Joshua saying Mwambie Jim atembe Kenya, means that Jim, they're asking you if you can visit Kenya. And also we have Chris Emmanuel. Oh, there are so many. Sorry, I'm going through them. Chris Emmanuel Ocheng saying tuned in. And then we also have question, ask him his favorite team. I know he has a favorite. And then, okay, that is what we have. Also another same question, which team does he support? And then Chris says Jim, Beglin, and Peter Drury are arguably the best football commentary partnership. Big respect to Jim and Peter. Keep them coming. Yes, I'll continue reading them. Keep them coming. Let's just go to that before we go to some of the best memories you've had so far. Let's talk about your bet. Which team do you support? That's what nearly everyone is asking here.
Well, I live north of Liverpool on Merseyside in a seaside town called Southport, and I support Southport. That's the team I support with my son.
Okay.
They're a non-league team, unfortunately, and they're trying to work their way back into the fifth tier of English football, currently in the sixth. Obviously, because of the restrictions and where I live at the moment, we're in a tier 3 lockdown, so I can't go and watch them play. And they played on Tuesday night against York City and lost 3-2 at home, unfortunately. But they're still in a decent position. They're third in the table at the moment. So hopefully they'll put a good run together. There'll be a lot of people out there thinking, no, he's lying here because he's got to be a Liverpool fan or a Leeds fan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very fond of Liverpool and Leeds. And obviously, if you've played for clubs, then you have a connection. You have a connection that will always be there, that will always exist. But I can assure you that if I go to support the team proper, it's my local club, Southport.
Yes, and I also remember how I felt the passion for both sides when they played together in the first match of the season, that is Liverpool and Leeds, and it was a very good match.
Yeah.
It was a very fast-paced match. It was a good
Yeah.
match. I remember it. So quickly, what club has impressed you? Which club has impressed you so far in the Premier League and also in the UEFA Champions League?
Well, in the Champions League, I would have to say Bayern Munich again. I think it's just a carry on from last season, and they look extremely strong. I can remember in the 70s they won it 3 times in a row. I think I'm correct in saying. I don't know whether this team is capable of doing that, because it's not easy to do what Real Madrid did not so long ago. But it looks as if they've got a very good chance of certainly defending it again. And the way they've begun their campaign, they seem very determined to do that. In Premier League terms, I would have to say Leicester and Tottenham that have equally impressed me, because I was there when Manchester City were beaten 5-2 by Leicester at the Etihad. And I know they had 3 penalties on the day and things went for them. But I just have a feeling Leicester this time around have learned the lessons of last season when they fell away. They fell away in the second half of the season, and they didn't have the substance. They didn't have the stamina. But I think there's a little more strength in that squad now. And I just see Leicester staying around a little longer. And Jose Mourinho, I mean, look, I was at Old Trafford that day when they hit Manchester United for 6. And not just because of that day, but I think because of how he's worked with building his squad or rebuilding this squad. And all of a sudden, I've just looked at it and looked at the bench, and I thought, you've got a lot going for you, you know. And Gareth Bale hasn't yet kicked in. I don't think he's up to speed. So they have a whole other dimension to realise as yet. So, you know, along with the Liverpools and the Manchester Cities and Manchester United's, Arsenal's and all that, I think Leicester and Tottenham can make serious claims to the title this season.
Amazing. And which I know no fans are in the stadium, but because they also make the commentary, you know, seem nice when they're screaming and shouting and celebrating the goals. But which has been your memorable match so far when you're doing commentary? Well,
you mentioned it before, Shon. I'm going to go with the first one. I mean, yeah, I was at Old Trafford for that 6-1. I was at the Etihad for the 5-2. I've seen some crazy games so far, but that Liverpool Leeds game was, and it was my first game and Peter's, was superb to work on. It was a dream to work on. You can only mess a commentary like that up, but the fact that Liverpool looked as if they were going to show them who's boss at the start, and then Leeds just said, no, hang on a minute, we've got a bit more to our game, and they came back at Liverpool like cheeky chappies, and they just kept coming back at Liverpool. Every time Liverpool stepped ahead again, they hit them once more, you know, and I love that. And another game that really stands out for me, less goals, was the Leeds-Manchester City game, because the intensity of that game was superb as well. And again, Leeds got off to a slow start and then started dictating to Manchester City second half. So Leeds, I think Leeds are going to have a roller coaster type season, but they're going to thrill a few.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to see how when Bielsa sits on his bucket and he's
Yeah.
watching and picking the game, it's very interesting to see that. So, who's the player to watch out for this season, Jim? Who has got you excited?
Thomas Partey. Because I'm sure Arsenal fans are really appreciating what
Yes.
they've acquired now. Because
Mm-hmm.
when he was at Atletico Madrid, I thought he was just dogged and defensive and a player that just breaks the opposition play up and then gives it to somebody who's better on the ball than him. But there's so much more to his game than that because he's got it all. Because he can put his foot on the ball, get his head up, he can pick a pass. And he's box to box if necessary. So I honestly think that he's a huge addition to what Mikel Arteta is trying to build at Arsenal and trying to move them on. But having won, of course, at Old Trafford as well with that 1-0 win, I was stunned to see them then go and lose to Aston Villa. And, but Thomas Partey seems to be forming a very good relationship with Mohamed El Neni. And I like that combo they've got in central midfield. But Thomas Partey is the one that I'm looking to see how he develops through the season. And it is a tough season too for players that are at clubs who are performing in Europe because the schedules are crazy.
Yes, and I know Arsenal fans in Kenya are celebrating because Jim, here in Kenya, the biggest football rivalry when it comes to the English Premier League is Manchester United and Arsenal. So you can imagine how the Arsenal fans are like, yes, Jim is rooting for Thomas Partey. So let's now go back into the commentary. I know you had talked about this the last time we had an interview, but now for also our online people, they also want to know this. How did you get to commentary and why commentary? And how was that transition like from active pitch life, going into retirement and saying, why not? Let me give it a try. And now you're here doing the best of the best.
Well, none of it was intended, Sean, because there was I played for the Republic of Ireland as well. And once I suffered my injury at Liverpool, I was asked to do some media work. And there was a guy called Gabriel Egan. And I blame him forevermore. And he was a radio commentator for RTE, the national broadcaster, who I work for in Ireland still. And because he'd interviewed me a few times after games, I think he thought I could put a sentence or two together. So he recommended me. And while I was still having problems with injuries and operations, I was asked to go to Italia 90 to work for Irish Radio and work with him. And I did that. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it. And then coming back from that, Granada Television is the regional television station in the northwest of England. Mm-hmm. And I think at the time they were asking ex-pros or pros that had maybe prematurely retired from the game through injury to go and sit at games and do little reports back into the studio on a Saturday afternoon. And they asked me to go to Liverpool, Nottingham Forest. And I did that, and they seemed to be very pleased at what I did. And next minute, I found myself in a TV studio, which I didn't want to be in. I never really wanted to do the studio work. You get some great analysis in studio, don't get me wrong. But an awful lot of what is said in studio is conjecture, speculation. What's happening on a football pitch is fact. And I just put my interpretation on the fact. So I've always enjoyed being on site. And being amongst the atmosphere, obviously not at the moment. So I was always tempted that way. And bit by bit, even though people were telling me, "Are you going to harm your career if you don't do as much studio work?" I was keen on just becoming a better co-commentator and going down that route. And thankfully, I'm still getting away with it, and I have certainly no regrets.
Amazing. And of course, how much preparation goes into a match, Jim? Just, when, let's say, before that Liverpool versus Leeds United match, how much preparation went into that? How do you go about it, if you can break it down for you?
Well, yeah, I think people have seen Peter's notes, and he's impressed everybody with that. Yes. Certainly that video I put out in lockdown of him. So he confirmed the amount he puts in. And he really does put a lot of work in. But I learned from the likes of Peter Drury, John Champion, Clive Tilsley, George Hamilton in Ireland, the guys I've worked with, that I can do preparation too. I remember somebody saying to me years ago, your career is your preparation for the media. Well, I disagree with that. My career was one thing, and yes, it's given me a lot of experience and a lot to offer. But each game has a different set of circumstances around it. And you need to know how each team's formation is in place, and you need to find out, who's making the team tick. You need to see them play. So I record stuff in the planner on my TV all the time, and I always watch a couple of games back for each game. But before that Liverpool Leeds game, the week before it, a lot of the players were away on international duty, but Leeds were playing a Portuguese team at their training ground. So I asked the Premier League, could they get me accredited? And I went up and I stood on my own on the far side of the pitch. And I watched a lot of the guys that were on the fringe of that team, which was great for me to be able to see how they operate too. And if they come off the bench, then, I've got a line for those guys because I've watched them play. So my job is about being prepared, one thing, but I have to have a very broad knowledge of the analytics that go behind each team, and so I always try and make sure that I'm up to speed when it comes to that. Wonderful.
And have you ever been criticized because during commentary?
No.
I know. No. And of course,
all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
It's the job. It comes with the territory. There's nothing you can do about it, because you got to remember, my job is to critique as well. And if I say something objective about a team, then a certain amount of the fans of that team will think you're out of order there. You didn't need to go there, blah, 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 whatever. But it's my job. And, whatever people think about me having an allegiance to Liverpool or Leeds, once I get behind the microphone, I don't care who's playing. Now, I know people find that hard to believe, but it's true. I don't care who's playing. I tried to call the game honestly, and I tried to say what I see. And I put my interpretation on what's happening down below. And I've always done that, and I won't change from it. And if people think that some of my words are a bit overly critical, then it comes with the territory. I don't try and go over the top. I never go that far and start, lashing out at teams. But I know my job by now, and I know what's required of me. It's a fan's job to be biased, to be utterly loyal to their team. And the fans don't seem to get it, because the fans keep accusing commentators of bias. We don't care. We honestly don't care. We just want to get a good commentary on the game. We want to be accurate in terms of what we add to what's happening on the pitch. And that's all we care about. And as long as my bosses are happy, that's all that bothers me. If fans want to moan, then I just laugh at it.
So how do you deal with the negativity? Because when studies were being done, especially when it comes to depression and how that especially affects people in the limelight, including the footballers, you've been a former player, you were once criticized on the pitch, and now then onto this, you transition to this other career, still being criticized. How do you keep it moving, Jim? And what would you advise? Because we also have the same thing happening to some of the commentators here in Kenya and also in Africa. What's your advice to them, and what keeps you moving from that negativity?
Well, I think you need to grow a thick skin, because I think if you're going to preside over games of football, then it seems to work people up. People seem to get, emotionally very high or very, very low. And then you're on the receiving end of all of that. So I honestly, I've seen lots and lots of abuse aimed at me, and I can laugh at it now, because generally it's a fan just getting upset in the moment, and 30 minutes later the moment is gone. I also would like to add that I'm glad that I'm not starting as a broadcaster nowadays amongst social media, because I think it can be brutal on somebody young who's coming into it new. So I I was ready really for social media and what it might unload. So it hasn't really affected me and the experience I've had. But in terms of commentators, you got to remember that I'm a co-commentator. So commentators are usually journalists who take that route into broadcasting. They're usually all university educated and journalists. So I would say to anybody who wants to become a commentator, then get yourself educated, get your journalism degree, and then start making moves as to what role you'd like to take in terms of commentary or behind the scenes, whatever. So for me, it's very different. I mean, if I'm going to advise somebody who wants to be a commentator, then usually you've had to play the game, and you've had to play the game at a high standard. So yeah, and I always kind of say, be yourself. Be yourself. You can obviously take little lines or little habits from a mentor, or for somebody who's inspired you to go into that line of work. That's fine. But I know people who've changed their voices when they go on air, and who change what they do. Well, don't, because you have to be honest and you have to be true to yourself, and just try and find a way of relaxing. Just try and say what you see, and call things genuinely and honestly, and everything will be fine. But what I would also say is I learned quickly on my side of commentary that I'm now working with university educated people, and I need to broaden my vocabulary. I need to be able to be a thesaurus and be able to find a word. If I can't use that word, then I need to be able to come up with another word. And I worked hard at that in my earlier years, because football took me into the game early, and I didn't get a chance to go to university. I probably wouldn't have managed it anyway. But so yeah, I was always keen to learn, because once my career ended in football, I had to say to myself one day, hang on a minute now, you can't just mess about here. This is serious now, and this is going to be your career. This is the way you're going to earn your income for the rest of your working life. Then you need to dedicate some serious time to it. So I did that, and I probably did a lot of work back in the day that I didn't really want to do. But I came out of the game not being a big name, so I had to put the work in. And I did a lot that served me well in the longer term. And as I say, Shon, I feel blessed. I feel extremely fortunate that I'm still able to do what I do, and amongst really good people too.
And now we are talking about the World Cup, the English Premier League, Cup games. Like Jim, you have co-commentated throughout, and you definitely, and still now, you're still doing an amazing job. Any match, I know I've asked you about a match for this season, but any match, which match has stood out for you since you started this commentary journey?
It has to be Istanbul in 2005, the Champions League final. And I was working for the Irish broadcaster I referred to earlier, RTE. In fact, had all been well, I might be at Wembley tonight working for RTE, but the protocols prevent that at the moment. Yeah. So that was just a manic game of football. And I can remember saying at half time that it's men against boys. When the two teams left the pitch with AC Milan 3-0 up, and just thinking that there's no way back. Some Liverpool fans, it's already out there that were leaving the stadium at the time. And then, a goal was scored, Gerrard. And then another one went in, and you're thinking, surely not. And then another one went in, and all of a sudden it's 3-3. And then Dijk makes those saves, and Liverpool end up winning it on penalties. And that's just an absolute crazy night. I can always remember we drank through the night. And I jumped on it. I didn't go to bed, and I got on a plane the next morning and flew straight home. And then we went to the golf course to celebrate. I don't know why, because we were terrible. We were too drunk. And then, unbeknownst to me, ITV were trying to get me down to London because they were making a special program. But of course, I was out golfing and having a few drinks. So it wasn't until I got in later that night that I was aware of it at all. By then it was too late. So that would be the game. In terms of the atmosphere, I always say this, an atmosphere that I'll never forget was Barcelona against Inter Milan in 2010. Jose Mourinho's Inter won the treble. They were 3-1 up after the first leg in the semi-final when they went to the Nou Camp. Went a goal down, I had a player sent off, and us against the world, Mourinho at his best, us against the world. And I think it was announced then that he was likely to go to Real Madrid. So he was being hated in Catalonia and the Nou Camp. And as soon as the final whistle went and they went through 3-2 on aggregate, he ran across the pitch pretending to celebrate with the Inter fans. But of course, he's just winding everyone in Catalonia up. And I always remember the people at Barcelona put the sprinklers on to stop their celebrations, to try and get them off the pitch. But the atmosphere, Shon, I've been to the Nou Camp many, many times, but I've never known an atmosphere like that evening. It was on another level entirely, and it was just so special to experience it. The tension in that stadium on that evening, as Barcelona were trying to overcome a 3-1 deficit from the first leg. It was an incredible night, and for atmosphere, that will always stay with me.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can picture all your stories while you're saying them. Amazing, amazing. So let's quickly also relive your playing days just briefly. Any major differences then and now? I know you have a couple, and I would love to get, what are some of also your best and worst memories of your playing days?
Well, the best memories are quite easy. I mean, I played in a European Cup final / Champions League final, but it was the night of a tragedy. And when we played Juventus in Brussels, and 39 Juventus fans lost their lives because of events before the game. But I wasn't aware of any of that. I heard maybe 1 or 2 people had been killed. But there was no confirmation of that. So I went out to try and play the game and to try and win it. And we lost it to a penalty, which was never a penalty. But anyway, it didn't matter. Football didn't matter that night because other events took over. So I'm quite proud of that. A year later, I won the league and the FA Cup with Liverpool. We won the double. And we should have won the treble. We lost in the semi-final of the League Cup, the Littlewoods Cup as it was then, the EFL Cup. So I'm very fortunate to have even maybe had a short career, but to live, with big games. And at a club like Liverpool, there was always pressure on you to perform. And I think the same is in place at the moment. What I regret is going into a tackle on the 21st of January 1987 at Goodison. I won the ball and my leg ended up in a mess, but there's nothing I can do about that now. And I'm not bitter about it, whatever Evertonians say, because you have to move on in life. Otherwise, it'll just tear you apart. So, I've managed to do that. But the one thing I'll say, the one big difference I'll say between players of my era and players now, when I was playing, there was a drinking culture, not just at Liverpool, all over England, all over the UK. Seriously. And a lot of it was great because it helped with camaraderie, it helped with spirit, and we'd have a great time and we'd bond. And, we were together on and off the pitch. That's the way it was. I wish I drank less. And I'm sure there's a lot of guys that would say the same thing. We played it hard on and off the pitch. But nowadays, it's all controlled. It's diet, and players are very conscious of what they consume in terms of alcohol. And it's very little in regard to what we did back then. So, yeah, if I could look back and change anything, probably be less alcohol and a certain tackle that, I wish I'd avoided.
I love the less alcohol part. Also, another difference you have to admit is the VAR, which has been so controversial, Jim, this season. So controversial. Tell me your thoughts about the VAR this season and just everything going on.
Well, I was for it, and it's not just this season. I was for it when it was introduced because we'd almost reached a level of breaking point where people were utterly fed up of the big decisions not being called right. And so we felt that technology was needed. Now, Hawkeye was in place, was introduced, and we have no problems with that, although that did have one big mistake in it last season as well. Sheffield United, Aston Villa, of course, when it should have been a goal and it wasn't. So Hawkeye relaxed for whatever reason on that particular evening. In terms of VAR, I think it has brought some good. I think that it has proven to clear up some of the clear and obvious errors. But equally, I think it's not in keeping with the spirit of the game. And that's what I would have to say now. And for two reasons. I think when we're talking about, inches when it comes to where your heel is or where your toe is, or where your arm is. I think, we saw the Bamford one recently when he was pointing where he wanted the ball. And he was deemed offside because one little section of the top of his arm was a fraction. And I just think on those, they should just let it go and just say, no, look, that's fine. If it's within a certain margin. But then again, if they introduce a margin like that, they'll probably start arguing over the distance of the margin. So I don't know how they're going to reason everything out. But the other one would be the handball law, because I've been there as a player, and the ball I think moves a lot faster now because it's lighter, and it's designed to bend. It's designed to move around in the air, and it's very hard when a ball is coming at you like that. I mean, sometimes you almost twitch towards the ball, and even though I was at the Etihad last Sunday and I knew that Joe Gomez, I just said straight away, they're going to give it.
Yeah.
It's not what I thought about it anymore. It's just we were told that any arm that extends away from the body, then it's probably going to be given as a handball and a penalty. But I'd just like to see a review on that, because I think each individual moment should be judged on its merits. And at least Craig Pawson did go and look at the monitor before he made his mind up. And that's something. We weren't seeing that last season. That's something I like about this season. But overall, I'm growing away from VAR now. I'm not nearly as enthused as I once was about it.
Yes. And also let's also talk about Liverpool leaving Melwood there. You have been, during your former playing days, you're there, and now they're going after 70 as well. Now they are heading on to this new side. Tell us about your memories there and how this switch is happening for the club.
Yeah, well, for me, Melwood was right up there close to Anfield in terms of, names connecting Liverpool Football Club, because so much of the great work has been done over the years at Melwood. All the plans have been put in place at Melwood. And Melwood had a legendary status. And when I first arrived at Anfield, I was on a month's trial, month's loan from Shamrock Rovers in Dublin, Ireland. And going to Melwood was just a dream for me, just to take it all in. Back then was very different to how it looks now, because it's beautiful now. I was there a couple of years ago, and it's amazing, really, the transformation it's had. But yeah, I can remember we had our big, thick sweaters. I was there on a miserable April day with my first training session. Yeah. And I can remember we were playing on the all-weather pitch. And what would often happen, Shon, would be that the coaches and the older pros would play against the younger pros. And for whatever reason, it seemed like it was about 13, 14 aside on this particular day. But there was one first teamer in, and it was Graham Souness. He had asked for the next day off because the rest of the first team squad had that day off and weren't in. So he wanted to come in and train so he could have the next day off. So he got on the ball, and it's my first session, and I've got to make an impression. I've got to impact here because, I've got to stand out for these guys if they're going to sign me. Yeah. And the first thing I did was take the ball off Souness. Now, I always remember Roy Evans saying it to me at a later stage, that always sat in his mind. And he thought, well, fair dues that you've had the courage to go and do that. And about 5 minutes later in the game, we're on the all-weather pitch and it's all slushy and, it's sleet and it's trying to snow. And so I thought, well, I'll go and take it off him again. So I moved towards Graham Souness once more. And Souness always played with his arms up like that by way of protection. Mm-hmm. And he saw me coming from the side and he elbowed me in the jaw so hard that I couldn't believe I was going to be able to carry on. And I was honestly dizzy. He knocked me dizzy. He hit me so hard. It was like as if he's saying, you're having a laugh. You think you're going to do that to me again? So, so I managed to somehow recover and get myself kind of running around again and stay involved in the game and trying to carry on with an impact. But that was my first day at Melwood. And I'll always remember that. There's a sad time for me as well, because once I suffered my injury and I had a succession of injuries thereafter, I would do what I could at Melwood and I would go through my sessions, but my leg was in a full leg plaster at the time. So I was very limited in what I could do. So I was consigned to standing. There was a gym at the end of the pavilion, the building, and there was a gym, and I was consigned to standing against the radiator, which was warm, and looking out at the first team train. And that broke my heart. I'm not looking for any sympathy. I'm over it. But at the time, that was really hard for me, because everything I'd worked for to get to that standard and be playing, and training amongst the first team at Melwood. And then all of a sudden it was taken away. And initially that was mentally very, very exhaustive. But you have to move on in life. All the magic happened at Anfield, but all the hard work, the graft, the grind, the sweat, and some blood was shed at Melwood, and it will always be remembered as a special place.
Yes. I think you have said it better as a former Liverpool player, so you know how much Melwood meant to the club. So now let's go to the fans' questions, and definitely the first one. I think you had answered. No. Do you ever make mistakes during commentary? And if yes, how do you recover from that?
Yes, we do make mistakes. Peter will admit to that too. Sometimes you will get a player wrong, or you will maybe just get your games mixed up slightly. And that happens. It's inevitable. I think last weekend, Everton, Manchester United, I referred to Manchester United's defeat in Istanbul. And I had De Gea in goal when it should have been Henderson. So little things like that can happen. But one of my bosses from when I first started my broadcasting career said to me, look, if you make a little error, don't reflect on it. Don't go back. Because if you go back, you're just highlighting it and you're just compounding the error. You're making it seem worse than it was. So if you've made an error and you can correct it quickly, do so. But if a little bit of time has passed, leave it. So that's what I try to do.
Wonderful. Apart from football commentary, what do you do during your free time? And also I need you to tell us about your love for golf, because that is what I see on my Twitter all the time when I refresh. When you're not doing commentary, I always see you talk about golf and all that. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I golf filled a big void for me, because when I did retire, I needed something to keep my competitive edge. And golf has a habit of, you can look stupid playing golf. It can be the most difficult game in the world. But then you'll hit a shot and think, oh, I can do that again. And it almost, you're bitten by the bug and you want it again. And particularly with me, I've always been competitive all my life. I think, well, if I can do that, then I can get better at that. So I threw myself into golf back then. And I became a decent golfer. I became a 4 handicap golfer on what is a tough course where I'm a member. But recently, because I'm so busy, I hardly get to play. I get to play once every so often. And that's hard. And what's hard at the moment, Shon, is the fact that the Masters is on the TV. And yeah, I've given that up to speak to you. So. oh, thank you. I feel so honored. No, I'm pleased to do that, because my wife is always having a go at me. She's always saying, "Oh, you're watching more football." I said, "I have to. It's my job." She said, "Oh, you're watching the golf again." So she loves to kick me out of the TV lounge if she can. So I'm more than happy to be here.
Yeah. So during your free time, most of it is either playing or watching golf. Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, do you run any mentorship programs for upcoming or aspiring commentators?
Sorry, say that one again, Shon.
Do you run any mentorship programs or for upcoming or aspiring commentators?
Yeah, no, I don't. Although I've recently discovered that there is a broadcasting organization in the UK that's using my commentary to coach some of the up and coming co-coms who've just retired from the game, which was nice to hear, but I'm not getting a penny for it. Yeah. So, but no. In terms of mentoring, I would be very pleased to advise anybody if they came and asked for any advice from me, any help. I would be more than happy to do that. But it seems as if they're being coached elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think they can always drop a message to you on Twitter because you're very active on Twitter.
Yeah.
So everyone who's watching, Jim Beglin is the Twitter account. And this is a fun question, but it was funny receiving it from one of our fans who asked, would you consider having a fun job of commentating at people's weddings and also sending birthday wishes?
Drury could pull that off, no problem. That would be easy for him. For me, that would be a nightmare. I certainly wouldn't put myself in that position because people have said to me that, why haven't you tried to get into the golf game, to be maybe an on-course reporter or something like that. But I think you have to have played the sport to a high level. And, I haven't played golf to that kind of level. So same with weddings. Making my own speech when I got married was difficult enough, and I've been best man a couple of times, and that's been tricky. But that's as far as I've taken it. No, you won't be hearing me commentate on anything else other than football. Yes, and our last question is from Ochiweda. Says John. Sorry, I just read my name wrong. Shon asked Jim if he's given a coaching job, will he leave his commentating job? Yeah, it's not going to happen. Nobody is going to want me as a coach now, I don't think. I actually, funnily enough, when my career ended, I had started what was then the coaching badges, going through the coaching badges, now coaching licenses. And I had passed my prelim, but then the media came knocking and I never went back to it. So you have to be qualified as a coach nowadays. Otherwise, you can't be involved in the technical area. And I haven't got the licenses that are involved. So there is very little chance of me being asked to go down the coaching route. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure I'd want to at this stage. I mean, for me, staying in touch with the game, I found the media, a great way of doing it. And it's been really good to me. Yeah. Thank you so much. You've been quite the fun spot. So before we wrap up, Jim, to your Kenyan fans and also African fans, what's your message to them? I know they're watching. I know they're enjoying the English Premier League this season. They can't wait for the international break to be over and just have you and Peter Drury back in the booth giving us the best of the best. The floor is yours. Well, the first thing I would say is we appreciate your passion. Your love of the Premier League all over Africa, but Kenya is one of the bigger countries in terms of its love of the Premier League and its love of football, and we're very much aware of that, and we have huge appreciation for you guys and what you dedicate to what we do. So I'm just humble and happy to be in a position to commentate around the world, and the fact that Kenya seems to like it is just absolutely lovely. So I couldn't want for more, and we know you're out there. We know you're out there. We're not allowed to kind of go naming countries and start saying this and that about each country, but if we could, Kenya would be getting regular mentions. So from Peter and I, and I'm sure I can say that, we send much love. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for just sharing all your, memories from playing days, all your wisdom about commentating, and just also inspiring
upcoming commentators who have literally fallen in love, and also the fans who have fallen in love with you and Peter and your work. So we wish you all the best from Kenya, and thank you so much for doing this with us and with me, and also on this show, that is the Shon Osimbo Sports Show. We have also so much lined up for you. Next Thursday, we'll be having another guest. So thank you so much, Jim. God bless you and continue shining high. Kenya supports you. Africa supports you. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Shon. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you very much for easing me through it. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.